The door is right there. No one is keeping you here." Brandon's words cut through the silence of his corner office, overlooking downtown San Francisco. I sat across from him. 16 years of loyalty reduced to this single moment. He fired me without warning, without severance discussion, just cold dismissal. I smiled calmly, closed my laptop with a soft click, and stood. I smoothed my blazer and walked toward the door. Brandon looked smug, confident he had won. I paused at the threshold, my hand on the doorframe, said nothing, and left. I walked past my empty cubicle, past the conference room where I had presented countless innovations, past the break room where I had spent thousands of lunch hours. My hands stayed steady as I made my way to the parking garage. The elevator ride down felt longer than usual, each floor a memory sliding past. When I reached my Honda, I sat behind the wheel, but did not start the engine immediately. The leather seat felt cold. My phone lit up with 3 missed calls from colleagues already. 16 years. I was 23 when I joined MedTech Solutions, fresh out of Stanford with a master's degree in biomedical engineering. The company had only 20 employees back then, crammed into a tiny office in South San Francisco. Brandon was just the vice president of operations then, not the CEO. He wore khakis and actually knew everyone's name. The company specialized in medical diagnostic equipment, mostly standard stuff, nothing revolutionary. I was assigned to the neural imaging division, excited to finally apply everything I had learned. Those first years were magical. I worked alongside brilliant people who cared about saving lives. We would order pizza at 10 at night and debate the future of medical technology until midnight. I felt like I was part of something meaningful, but it was at age 28, 5 years into my tenure, that everything changed. I developed something that would reshape the entire company. I had been working on a neural pattern recognition algorithm, something that had been gnawing at my mind for years. The technology could detect early-stage neurological diseases through pattern analysis. I worked nights and weekends for 3 years, perfecting it, testing it, refining every detail. My apartment became my laboratory. I bought my own equipment, used my own computer, stayed up until 3 in the morning running simulations. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday night in March. The algorithm could diagnose Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, and multiple sclerosis, up to 7 years earlier than any existing method. The accuracy rate was 94%. When I filed the patent application, I listed myself as the sole inventor. This was crucial. I did this on my own time, using my own resources at home, never once using company equipment or company hours. The employee handbook at the time was explicit about this. I still have the original PDF saved, dated, and notarized. It stated clearly that employees retained rights to inventions created outside work hours without company resources. I made sure of this before I started. I was careful, methodical, protective of my work. MedTech Solutions licensed my technology, and everything exploded. The company transformed from 20 employees to 800 in just 5 years. We became the industry leader in early neurological disease detection. Revenue jumped from $12 million annually to $2.3 billion. Hospitals across the country wanted our machines. We saved lives every single day. Brandon became CEO 3 years ago during this massive growth, promoted from VP to the top position. He took credit for the expansion at every investor meeting. But 6 months ago, everything started to sour. Brandon began pushing me to reassign the patent to the company. He would corner me after meetings, his voice low and insistent. He claimed it would be better for everyone, that it would simplify things. He offered me a promotion to senior director and a $50,000 bonus. I refused. The patent was my security, my retirement plan, the fruit of 3 years of my life poured into late nights and personal sacrifice. I told him no. His attitude changed immediately. Brandon became cold, distant. He started excluding me from meetings I had always attended. He criticized my work in front of others. He questioned my decisions. He made my life difficult in 1,000 small ways. The warmth we once had as colleagues vanished completely. And today? He fired me. He cited performance issues and company restructuring, neither of which was true. My performance reviews had been excellent for 16 years straight. I finally started my car and drove home through the streets of San Francisco. The city looked the same, but everything felt different. I pulled into my apartment building's garage, took the elevator up to the 8th floor, and unlocked my door. My cat, Pepper, greeted me with a confused meow. It was only 2 in the afternoon. I never came home this early. I poured myself a glass of white wine and opened my laptop at the kitchen table. My hands were still steady. I navigated to the United States Patent and Trademark Office website and checked my patent status. The patent had been granted 2 months ago, finalized and official. Market analysts had valued it at $1.9 billion. It had 14 years remaining before expiration. And here was the detail Brandon never bothered to check. My licensing agreement with MedTech Solutions expired in exactly 30 days. I smiled for the first time since being fired. Brandon had made the biggest mistake of his career. My phone started vibrating at 6:30 the next morning. I woke to the sound of it rattling against my nightstand, over and over. I reached for it, squinting at the screen. 54 missed calls. 37 text messages. 20 emails. All from MedTech Solutions. Brandon had called 12 times. Patricia Armstrong, the chief legal officer, had called 8 times. There were calls from board members I had never spoken to directly in my entire 16 years. Company lawyers whose names I barely recognized. Even the head of human resources, the same woman who had processed my termination paperwork yesterday, with barely a glance in my direction. I made coffee first, French press. The good beans from the roaster down the street. I sat at my kitchen table and scrolled through the messages. They ranged from professional to desperate to almost threatening. I took a sip of coffee and decided to answer one call. Patricia Armstrong. The chief legal officer was normally composed, professional, almost cold in her efficiency. But when I called her back at 7 in the morning, her voice was strained, barely controlled. "Molly, we need to talk. Immediately. Can you come in this morning?" I kept my voice calm and even. "I don't work there anymore, Patricia." Brandon made that very clear. There was a pause. I could hear her breathing. "This is about your licensing agreement. We just realized it expires in 30 days. I'm aware." Another pause. Longer this time. "We need to renew. Name your price." "I'm not interested in renewing." Her voice cracked slightly, the professional veneer slipping. "Molly, please? Be reasonable. This company is built on your technology. 83% of our revenue depends on your algorithm. Without it, our diagnostic machines are just expensive paperweights." I told her I would think about it and hung up. Then I turned off my phone completely. The silence in my apartment was profound. I checked my email on my laptop instead. Brandon had sent 6 messages, each one increasingly desperate. Each one sent in the dark hours of the early morning. The first email arrived at 2 in the morning, formal and professional, asking to discuss the licensing renewal at my earliest convenience. The second came at 3. More casual, mentioning mutual benefit and partnership. The third at 4 in the morning had an apologetic tone, suggesting the firing had been hasty and perhaps reconsidered. The fourth at 5 offered me my old job back with a raise. The fifth at 6 in the morning offered me a vice president position and a $300,000 signing bonus. The sixth, sent at 6:15, was just 3 words. "Please call me." My phone buzzed with a text message that somehow got through even though I had turned it off. It was from Sarah, one of my former colleagues and one of the few genuine friends I had made at MedTech Solutions. She was a project manager in the engineering division, smart and observant. The message read, "Emergency board meeting at 5 this morning. Everyone is freaking out. They just realized you own the patent and the license expires. Brandon is being destroyed by the board. They're asking why he fired you. Legal is in full panic. Nobody can believe he didn't know about the expiration date. Call me when you can." I read the message 3 times. So Brandon had never actually read the licensing agreement. He had assumed, in his arrogance, that the company owned my patent outright. He had fired me thinking I was powerless, thinking I had nothing. The board was now realizing what he had done. They were realizing that their entire business model, their stock price, their revenue, everything, depended on technology owned by a woman their CEO had fired yesterday. I made breakfast: scrambled eggs, toast, fresh fruit. I ate slowly, thinking through my options. The doorbell rang at 9 in the morning. I opened it to find a courier holding a large envelope. "Hand delivery for Molly Chen," he said. I took the envelope and signed for it. Inside was a letter on expensive paper with the MedTech Solutions Board letterhead. I read it standing in my doorway. They were offering me the position of Chief Innovation Officer. The salary was $750,000 per year. Stock options worth $2 million. A seat on the board of directors. And a personal written apology from Brandon, attached as a separate page. I read Brandon's apology. It was clearly written by a lawyer, stiff and formal, taking no real responsibility. I read the board's offer letter again. Then I tore both pages in half, walked to my kitchen, and dropped them in the recycling bin. I had already made my decision. I was not going back. I was going to start my own company. 3 days after Brandon fired me, I sat in a coffee shop in Palo Alto, across from a man named Thomas Hartley. He was 62 years old, silver-haired, wearing a casual button-down shirt and jeans. He looked like someone's friendly uncle, but he was a legend in Silicon Valley. Thomas had funded 12 unicorn companies over his 30-year career as a venture capitalist. He had made billions by betting on the right people at the right time. I had emailed him 2 days ago, cold. I explained my situation in 3 paragraphs and attached my patent documentation. He responded in 20 minutes, asking to meet. Now he sat across from me, sipping an espresso, reading through the papers I had brought. He looked up after 10 minutes. "So let me make sure I understand this correctly. You own a patent worth nearly $2 billion. Your former employer depends on this patent for over 80% of their revenue. They fired you. And their licensing agreement expires in 27 days. That's correct. And you want to start a competing company?" "I do. I've already improved the algorithm. The accuracy rate is now 97%, up from 94%. I can build better machines, reduce costs, and improve patient outcomes. I can do everything MedTech Solutions does, but better. Because I actually care about innovation instead of quarterly earnings." Thomas smiled. He set down his espresso. "How much do you need?" "I want to start with a Series A funding round of $100 million. That will cover initial operations, hiring, equipment, regulatory approval, and manufacturing partnerships." He did not hesitate. "You have it. I'll commit right now. Let me make some calls." Thomas took out his phone and stepped outside. Through the window, I watched him pace on the sidewalk, talking animatedly. He came back inside 15 minutes later. "I have 2 other VCs who want in. We're having lunch with them this afternoon. Can you do your pitch again at 1? By the end of that day, I had $200 million in committed capital. 3 venture capital firms believed in me enough to bet their money on my success. I sat in my car after the meetings, hands shaking for the first time since this whole thing started, and I cried. Not from sadness, but from relief and possibility. I named my company Neurovista Diagnostics. Over the next 2 weeks, I built my team. I reached out to former colleagues at MedTech Solutions. People who had been treated poorly, overlooked, undervalued. 12 engineers joined me, including 3 senior developers who had been passed over for promotions despite their brilliant work. Sarah, my friend, became my head of operations. I hired a CFO named Diana from a competitor company, someone with 20 years of experience and a reputation for integrity. I brought in a regulatory expert who knew the FDA approval process inside and out. A woman who had successfully navigated 17 device approvals. My legal preparation was thorough. I hired the best intellectual property law firm in San Francisco. They reviewed everything. Every document, every email, every piece of evidence. They confirmed what I already knew. My patent was completely secure. MedTech Solutions had 0 legal claim to it. The licensing agreement would expire in 20 days, and I had every right not to renew. But my lawyers discovered something else interesting. MedTech Solutions had filed 18 patents of their own over the years, all related to diagnostic imaging and neural pattern analysis. But every single one of those patents was built on top of my core algorithm. Without my patent, their patents were worthless. They were building castles on land they did not own. I leased office space in Mountain View. A modern building with an open floor plan and floor-to-ceiling windows. It was exactly what I had always wanted MedTech Solutions to be. Collaborative, transparent, full of light. I ordered prototype equipment from manufacturers I had researched for months. I partnered with a manufacturing facility in Portland, Oregon, that specialized in medical devices. I began the FDA approval process for my improved algorithm, submitting hundreds of pages of documentation. Sarah kept me informed about the chaos at MedTech Solutions. She still had friends there, people who texted her updates. Brandon had called 3 more emergency board meetings. The stock price was starting to dip, down 7%, because investors were sensing something was wrong. Rumors were leaking about licensing issues. Financial analysts were asking questions on earnings calls. Brandon had personally called me 16 more times. I had not answered once. 15 days after Brandon fired me, a legal notice arrived at my apartment. MedTech Solutions was suing me. The lawsuit was thick, over 40 pages of legal language. They claimed I had violated my employment contract. They claimed I had stolen trade secrets. They claimed the patent rightfully belonged to them despite all evidence to the contrary. They were seeking injunctive relief to prevent me from starting a competing business. They were demanding I transfer the patent to them immediately. The total amount they were seeking in damages, $3.5 billion. I read the lawsuit with my lawyers in their conference room. Robert, my lead attorney, was furious on my behalf. His face was red as he flipped through the pages, pointing out how baseless each claim was. But I stayed calm. I looked at Robert and the other 3 lawyers sitting around the table. I said, "Good, let them sue. Discovery will be very interesting for them." Robert paused and then smiled. "You're right. When we go into discovery, we'll have access to every email, every internal document, every communication about your patent. We'll be able to prove exactly what happened." I nodded. "Let's give them the fight they're asking for." 3 weeks after Brandon fired me, 1 week before my licensing agreement expired, I sat in a conference room for a deposition. The room was cold, sterile, with a long table and uncomfortable chairs. MedTech Solutions lawyers were aggressive from the first question. There were 4 of them, all men in expensive suits, and they took turns grilling me. Brandon sat behind his legal team, arms crossed, glaring at me with undisguised hostility. The deposition lasted 6 hours. They tried everything to prove I had used company time and resources to develop my algorithm. They asked about every late night I stayed at the office. They asked about every piece of equipment I had ever touched. They asked about every conversation I had ever had with other engineers. But I had receipts. Literally. I had timestamps from my home computer showing exactly when I had worked on the algorithm. I had electricity bills from my apartment showing increased usage during the 3-year development period. I had personal credit card statements showing I had purchased my own equipment, a specialized computer, software licenses, testing materials. I had witnesses who could testify they saw me working at home, including my neighbor, who often complained about my late-night typing. I had the company's own badge logs showing I had clocked out before working on my invention every single time. MedTech Solutions lawyers became increasingly frustrated. Their questions grew more hostile, more pointed, more desperate, but every answer I gave was backed by documentation. Then my lawyer, Robert, presented the employee handbook from 16 years ago. He placed it on the table with deliberate care. The handbook clearly stated that inventions created on personal time without company resources remained employee property. MedTech Solutions had changed their policy 8 years ago to claim all employee inventions. But my work predated that change. I was protected under the original rules. The judge overseeing the preliminary injunction hearing looked increasingly skeptical of MedTech Solutions' claims. After reviewing my evidence, she denied their request for an injunction. I was free to continue building my company. After the deposition ended, I packed my documents into my briefcase and headed for the elevator. Brandon followed me into the courthouse hallway, leaving his lawyers behind. He looked terrible. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. His suit was wrinkled. His hair, normally perfectly styled, looked unwashed. He grabbed my arm as I reached the elevator. "You're destroying us. Hundreds of people will lose their jobs because of you." I pulled my arm away and turned to face him. "You fired me, Brandon. You did this. You could have treated me with respect. You could have negotiated fairly. You could have valued my contribution. But you chose to push me out. These consequences are yours, not mine." His face flushed red. "I'll give you anything. Name it. $10 million? 20? A C-suite position? Whatever you want." I stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the ground floor. "You can't afford me." The doors closed on his stricken face. 2 days later, I discovered someone had hacked into my company email. The breach was sophisticated, professional. Our cybersecurity team traced the intrusion and found that my prototype designs had been accessed and copied. They traced the hack to an IP address in San Francisco registered to a cybersecurity firm that MedTech Solutions regularly used for their own security. The sabotage escalated quickly after that. Someone called the FDA filing anonymous complaints about NeuroVista Diagnostics, claiming safety violations that did not exist. The FDA was required to investigate every complaint, which delayed my approval process by 3 weeks. Someone contacted my investors, spreading false rumors about my mental stability. They claimed I was unstable, vindictive, impossible to work with. One smaller investor, spooked by the rumors, pulled out his $2 million commitment. But Thomas Hartley did not budge. He called me after hearing the rumors. "Molly, I've been in this business for 30 years. I've seen every dirty trick in the book. This is desperation. It means you're winning. Don't let it shake you." Sarah called me late one night, her voice barely above a whisper. "Molly, I need to tell you something. Brandon hired a private investigator to dig up dirt on you. They're looking into your personal life, your finances, your relationships. They're trying to find anything they can use to discredit you." She paused, and I heard fear in her silence. "There's something else. I overheard Brandon on a phone call. He said if they can't beat you legally, they'll beat you another way. I don't know what that means, but it scared me." The day before my licensing agreement was set to expire, I arrived at my office at 7 in the morning. I always came in early, before my team, to have quiet time to think and plan. But when I unlocked the door and stepped inside, I stopped breathing. The entire office had been vandalized. Every computer was destroyed, smashed open with something heavy. Our prototype machines were in pieces on the floor, delicate components scattered like confetti. Files were torn and thrown everywhere. Whiteboards were shattered. Desks were overturned. 3 months of work was destroyed. I called the police immediately. They arrived within 20 minutes and began documenting everything. The security cameras had been disabled. The footage wiped. There was no clear evidence of who had done this. The police detective, a tired-looking woman named Rodriguez, told me these cases were difficult to solve without witnesses or video evidence. The damage estimate came to over $2 million. More importantly, my FDA submission materials were destroyed. My team arrived one by one, and I watched their faces fall as they saw the destruction. Some of them cried, others just stood in stunned silence. I stood in the wreckage feeling genuine fear for the first time. This was not just business anymore. This was personal warfare. Someone wanted to destroy me completely, and they were willing to break the law to do it. But then I remembered something. I walked to my office, stepping over broken glass and torn papers. In the corner, hidden behind a false panel in the wall, was a safe I had installed myself. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside were backup drives containing every single piece of data, every design, every document, every line of code. The vandals had not known about them. Everything was recoverable. I turned to my team, who had gathered in my doorway watching me. We're okay. We have backups of everything. Well, rebuild. Well, replace the equipment. Well, resubmit to the FDA. This is a setback, not an ending. Sarah looked at me with tears in her eyes. How are you so calm? I smiled, though I did not feel calm inside, because giving up is not an option. And whoever did this just proved how desperate they are. Desperate people make mistakes. The FBI got involved 3 days later. The vandalism, combined with the hacking and the false reports to federal agencies, triggered a federal investigation. 2 agents came to interview me, taking detailed notes about everything that had happened since my firing. And that morning, the licensing agreement officially expired. MedTech Solutions no longer had any rights to my patent. Their diagnostic machines were now operating with unlicensed technology. My lawyers sent cease and desist letters to every hospital and clinic using MedTech Solutions equipment. The war had truly begun. I did not just stop MedTech Solutions. I went on offense. Within 24 hours of my licensing agreement expiring, I contacted their 3 biggest competitors: Health Diagnostic Corp., Neural Path Systems, and Brain Scan Technologies. I offered each of them licensing deals for my improved algorithm. The terms I offered were better than what MedTech Solutions had ever received: lower fees, more flexibility, and access to my 97% accuracy rate, instead of the 94% rate they had been using. All 3 companies signed within 48 hours. Suddenly, the market was flooded with diagnostic devices using my technology, all competing directly against MedTech Solutions. Hospital procurement departments started receiving calls from sales representatives offering better machines at better prices. The value proposition was clear. Why stay with MedTech Solutions when you could get superior technology from multiple sources? I also hired a public relations firm, one of the best in San Francisco. They advised me to go public with my story, to control the narrative before MedTech Solutions could paint me as a disgruntled employee. I gave an interview to TechCrunch, a major technology news website. The reporter was a woman named Jennifer, who had covered the medical device industry for years. We sat in a cafe, and I told her everything. The 16 years of loyalty, the patent I had developed on my own time, Brandon's attempt to coerce me into signing it over, the firing, the lawsuit, the vandalism. The article published 2 days later with the headline, "How MedTech Solutions Fired the Engineer Who Built Their Billion-Dollar Empire." It went viral. Within hours, it had 50,000 shares on social media. Within a day, over 200,000 people had read it. The comments section exploded with support for me and outrage at MedTech Solutions. I appeared on a popular business podcast called Founders and Builders. The host, a former entrepreneur himself, was sympathetic and let me tell my story without interruption. That episode became the most downloaded in the podcast's history. Social media erupted with hashtags supporting me. Business Twitter debated the ethics of corporate patent ownership. LinkedIn was full of posts about employee rights and innovation. Public opinion swung heavily in my favor. MedTech Solutions was labeled as exploitative, ungrateful, and short-sighted. The impact on MedTech Solutions was immediate and devastating. Their stock price plummeted 23% in a single day of trading, wiping out nearly $1 billion in market value. Major hospital systems started canceling their orders, switching to my new licensees who offered better technology at competitive prices. The FDA launched an investigation into MedTech Solutions for continuing to use unlicensed technology in their devices. 3 board members resigned within a week, citing disagreements with leadership. Employees started leaving in droves. Engineers, salespeople, even administrative staff were updating their LinkedIn profiles and taking interviews. Sarah told me the office felt like a sinking ship, with everyone looking for lifeboats. The board put Brandon on administrative leave while they investigated his handling of the situation. He was barred from the office, his email access suspended, his authority stripped away. The FBI investigation into the vandalism and hacking accelerated. Security footage from buildings near my office had captured a vehicle leaving the area around the time of the break-in. The vehicle was registered to a company that had business connections to MedTech Solutions. 2 men were arrested within days. Under questioning, they confessed they had been hired to vandalize my office. They named their contact, Brandon's executive assistant, a man named Marcus who had worked for Brandon for 5 years. My cybersecurity team provided the FBI with detailed logs of the hacking attempts, including the IP addresses and methods used. Federal prosecutors built a case for corporate espionage and computer fraud. The false FDA complaints were traced back to an anonymous email account that had been created using a company credit card from MedTech Solutions. Even the private investigator Brandon had hired came forward voluntarily. His name was David Reeves, and he had been in the investigation business for 20 years. He told federal prosecutors he had felt uncomfortable with what Brandon had asked him to do. He had kept detailed records of every conversation, every email, every instruction Brandon had given him. He provided emails showing Brandon had explicitly ordered him to find anything that could destroy my credibility, regardless of whether it was true or relevant. Federal prosecutors charged Brandon with conspiracy to commit corporate espionage, computer fraud, and obstruction of justice. He was arrested at his home in Sausalito at 6 in the morning. News cameras were there, tipped off by someone, and they captured footage of Brandon in handcuffs, being led to a police car. The image was on the front page of the San Francisco Chronicle the next morning. The board of directors at MedTech Solutions held an emergency meeting and terminated Brandon for cause. He received no severance, no golden parachute, nothing. The company issued a public apology to me, posted on their website, and sent to major news outlets. They begged me to consider licensing my technology to them again, promising fair terms and respect. I did not respond. But 3 days later, I received an unexpected phone call. The caller ID showed a number I did not recognize. I almost did not answer, but something made me pick up. Molly? This is Gerald Thornton. I sat up straighter. Gerald Thornton was the founder of MedTech Solutions, the man who had started the company 30 years ago in his garage. He had retired 8 years ago, long before Brandon became CEO. I had met him only a few times when I first started, but he had always been kind to me. Mr. Thornton, this is a surprise. His voice was warm, grandfatherly. He sounded like he was in his 70s. Please, call me Gerald. I'm calling from my home in Napa Valley because I needed to apologize to you. I built MedTech Solutions to save lives, not to play corporate games or destroy brilliant people like you. What Brandon did is unforgivable. I'm ashamed I wasn't more involved these past years. I let the company drift away from its mission. I appreciate that, Gerald. He paused, and I heard him take a breath. I own 18% of the company's stock, Molly. I'm still the largest individual shareholder. And I want to make you an offer. Buy the company. I'll sell you my shares at a discount, below market value. Help me convince the other board members to sell too. Takeover MedTech Solutions. Run it the way it should have been run all along. You have the vision, the integrity, and the technology. You could transform it back into something good. I was stunned into silence. I stood up from my desk and walked to the window, looking out over Mountain View. The idea was audacious. I had the capital from my investors. I had the patent. I had public support. I could actually do it. I could acquire the very company that had fired me. Let me think about it, I told Gerald. Give me 48 hours. Take your time, he said. But I hope you'll consider it. That company needs you. And I think, maybe, you need it too. Not for revenge, but for the chance to build something truly great. After I hung up, I sat in my office for an hour, thinking. I called Thomas Hartley and explained the situation. He was quiet for a long moment, then said, "This could be the best decision you ever make. You wouldn't just be winning. You'd be creating something meaningful." I called my entire team together that afternoon and told them about the offer. We talked for 3 hours, debating the pros and cons, the risks and opportunities. In the end, Sarah said what everyone was thinking. You could show them how a company should really be run. You could prove that ethics and success aren't mutually exclusive. I made my decision. I would acquire MedTech Solutions. 4 months after Brandon fired me, I stood in a boardroom at MedTech Solutions headquarters. The same building I had walked out of in shock and anger. But this time, I was here to negotiate the acquisition of the entire company. The boardroom was large and formal, with a long mahogany table and leather chairs. Present were the 5 remaining board members, a team of lawyers, financial advisors, and Gerald Thornton. Everyone looked exhausted. The company's value had dropped from $3.8 billion to $1.2 billion in just 4 months. The stock price had collapsed. Revenue was down 60%. They were desperate. I sat at the head of the table, flanked by my own lawyers and Thomas Hartley. I had prepared for this moment meticulously. I knew every number, every detail, every weak point in their position. I offered $800 million for full acquisition. I would merge Neurovista Diagnostics with MedTech Solutions. I would become CEO. I would honor all existing employee contracts and bring stability back to the company. The board members looked at each other. $800 million was far below the company's former valuation. But it was fair given the current situation. We negotiated for 6 hours. Every detail was debated. Employee retention, intellectual property transfers, facility leases, manufacturing contracts. In the end, we agreed on $850 million. The deal would close in 30 days pending regulatory approval. Thomas Hartley arranged a consortium of investors to fund the acquisition. My original backers doubled their investments. 3 private equity firms joined, seeing the potential for a turnaround. The total funding package was $900 million, which included the acquisition cost plus operating capital for the first year. In exchange, I retained 51% ownership of the merged company. I would have full control. The deal closed on a Monday morning in November, exactly 6 months after Brandon had fired me. I walked into MedTech Solutions as CEO, carrying the same briefcase I had carried out 6 months earlier. Word had spread through the company that I was taking over. Employees gathered in the main atrium, hundreds of them, watching as I made my way to the front. I had prepared a speech, but standing there looking at all those faces, I decided to speak from my heart instead. 6 months ago, I was fired from this company. I was told the door was right there, that no one was keeping me here. So I left. I took my patent, my dignity, and my future with me. Some of you reached out to support me during that difficult time. Some of you didn't. I don't hold grudges. What I do hold is a vision for what this company can be. I paused, looking around the room. This company was founded to save lives through innovation. Somewhere along the way, we lost sight of that mission. We became focused on stock prices and quarterly earnings instead of patience and breakthroughs. That changes today. We're going back to our roots. We're going to focus on innovation and patient outcomes. We're going to create a workplace culture based on respect and collaboration, not fear and exploitation. We're implementing profit sharing for all employees. We're committing to transparent leadership. We're going to do business ethically, even when it's hard. I took a breath. Everyone keeps their jobs. There will be no layoffs. We're rebuilding together. But I need your help. I need your commitment. I need you to believe in this company again. The room erupted in applause. Some people were crying. Others were smiling for the first time in months. Sarah stood near the front, beaming at me with pride. Over the next few weeks, I discovered the full extent of Brandon's mismanagement. He had inflated revenue numbers in reports to the board. He had cut corners on safety testing to rush products to market. He had created a culture of fear where employees were afraid to speak up about problems. He had spent lavishly on himself, using company money for a private jet, luxury office renovations, and expensive client dinners that were more about ego than business. I systematically reversed all of it. I sold the private jet and used the money to fund employee bonuses. I renovated the office to be more open and collaborative, tearing down walls and creating shared spaces. I implemented a whistleblower protection program so employees could report concerns without fear of retaliation. I brought in new leadership focused on ethics and long-term thinking rather than short-term gains. I personally met with every department over 2 weeks. I listened to their concerns, their ideas, their frustrations. I took notes and created action plans. I restored research and development funding that Brandon had cut. I restarted projects that had been canceled. I gave teams the resources they needed to innovate. The transformation was not instant, but it was real. Employee morale improved week by week. Productivity increased. People started smiling in the hallways again. The innovation that had made this company great began to return. 3 major hospital systems that had canceled their contracts agreed to meet with me. I flew to Boston, Chicago, and Seattle to personally pitch them on the new medtech solutions. I showed them our improved technology, our commitment to quality, and our renewed focus on patient outcomes. All 3 restored their contracts. The stock price began to recover slowly. Investors saw the changes and started to believe in the company's future again. Financial analysts upgraded their ratings. News articles praised the turnaround. Sarah, now my chief operating officer, and I had lunch together in the company cafeteria one day. We sat at a table by the window overlooking the bay. She looked at me and said, "You did it. You actually did it. You turned everything around." I smiled. "We did it. This isn't about revenge anymore. It never really was. It's about building something good. Something that matters." That evening, I returned home to find a letter in my mailbox. It was handwritten, my name on the envelope in unfamiliar script. I opened it standing in my kitchen. It was from Brandon. He was in federal detention, awaiting trial, facing 5 to 10 years in prison. The letter was 3 pages long, and every word dripped with bitterness and self-pity. He blamed me for his downfall. He said I had overreacted and destroyed his life over a simple business disagreement. He claimed he was only doing what any CEO would do to protect company interests. He said I was vindictive and cruel for not accepting his settlement offers. He showed absolutely zero remorse, zero understanding of what he had actually done wrong. In his mind, he was the victim. I read the letter once, then fed it through my paper shredder. Some people never learn. They never see how their own actions lead to consequences. They never take responsibility. Brandon was one of those people, and no amount of prison time would change that fundamental flaw in his character. But I had learned. I had learned my worth. I had learned to fight for myself. I had learned that justice, while sometimes slow, was possible. I had learned that the door being shown to you could be the beginning of something better, not the end of everything. I filed the incident away in my mind and moved forward. There was too much good work to do to waste time dwelling on Brandon's inability to grow. 1 year after Brandon fired me, I stood in my corner office looking out over San Francisco Bay. It was the same office where I had been fired, but I had completely redesigned it. The heavy curtains were gone, replaced with nothing so the natural light could flood in. I had added plants, comfortable chairs for collaborative meetings, and a large whiteboard for brainstorming. The massive mahogany desk was gone, replaced with a simple standing desk. The space felt open, welcoming, alive. MedTech Solutions, now fully merged with NeuroVista Diagnostics, was thriving. Our revenue had climbed back to $2 billion annually. The stock price had recovered 90% of its losses and was continuing to climb. Employee satisfaction scores, measured by an independent firm, were at an all-time high. People wanted to work here again. We were receiving hundreds of applications for every open position. More importantly, we were innovating again. We had launched 2 new products based on my continued research and improvements to the neural pattern recognition algorithm. The FDA had given us exemplary ratings for safety and efficacy. Patient outcomes had improved by 18% due to earlier disease detection and more accurate diagnoses. We were saving more lives, which was always the point. I was 36 years old now. My stake in the company was worth over $500 million on paper, making me wealthier than I had ever imagined possible. but the money was not what made me proud. What made me proud was walking through the office and seeing people excited about their work. What made me proud was reading letters from patients whose lives had been changed by early detection of diseases. What made me proud was building something ethical and successful at the same time. I had learned so much in this past year. I had learned that loyalty to yourself is just as important as loyalty to others. I had learned that being kind does not mean being a doormat. I had learned that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you can become the best thing, if you have the courage to act. I had learned that documenting everything and protecting your work is not paranoia. It is wisdom. Gerald Thornton visited my office one afternoon. He was 73 now, still sharp but moving a bit slower. He was semi-retired but remained on the board. He sat in one of my comfortable chairs and looked around the office with approval. "You've exceeded every expectation I had," he said. "You didn't just save this company. You gave it a soul again. You reminded everyone what we're supposed to be doing and why it matters." I thanked him, feeling emotional. "Your faith in me meant everything, Gerald. When you called and suggested I buy the company, I thought you were crazy. But you saw something I didn't see yet. You saw that I could do this." He smiled. "I saw what you always were, someone who cares more about doing good work than playing politics. That's rare, especially at this level. Don't ever lose that." That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my journal. I had started journaling a few months ago as a way to process everything that had happened. I wrote a letter to my 23-year-old self, the young woman who had walked into MedTech Solutions 16 years ago full of hope and dreams. I wrote, "Your work has value, even when others don't see it. Document everything. Protect yourself. Being kind doesn't mean being a doormat. Stand up for yourself, even when it's scary. Sometimes the bridge you burn lights the way forward. Your worth is inherent, not assigned by a title or a paycheck. Trust yourself. The door might be right there, and maybe no one is keeping you. But walking through that door might be the best decision you ever make." The next week, I hosted a company-wide town hall meeting. 500 employees gathered in our main auditorium, and hundreds more joined by video from our other offices. I stood on the stage, looking out at all those faces, and announced a new initiative. "We're starting a patent education program for every single employee. I want all of you to understand your rights as inventors and innovators. I want you to know how to protect your work. We're also creating a new company policy about employee inventions." I paused, letting the words sink in. "If any of you create something on your own time, with your own resources, you keep ownership. The company will offer fair licensing terms if we want to use your invention, but we will never try to take what is rightfully yours. What happened to me should never happen to anyone else. Not here. Not anywhere." The applause was thunderous. People understood what this meant. I was creating a culture of respect and fairness that went beyond words into actual policy. I addressed the lawsuit's outcome, which had finally been resolved. MedTech Solutions, under my leadership, had withdrawn all claims against me and issued a formal apology that was entered into the public court record. Brandon had been sentenced to 7 years in federal prison for his crimes. He had lost his fortune, his reputation, and his freedom. I felt no joy in his punishment, only a quiet sense that justice had been served. I looked out at my employees and spoke the truth I had learned. If you take one thing from my story, let it be this: know your worth. Protect your work. Don't let anyone make you feel small for standing up for yourself. The door might be right there, and maybe no one is keeping you. But sometimes, walking through that door is the best decision you'll ever make. On the other side might be fear, uncertainty, and struggle, but it might also be freedom, justice, and a future you build on your own terms. After the town hall, I received dozens of emails from employees thanking me. Many of them shared their own stories of being undervalued at previous jobs, of having their ideas stolen, of being pushed out. They said my story gave them hope that fairness was possible in the corporate world. At the end of the day, I closed my laptop and walked out of my office. My team was gathering for a dinner I was hosting at a restaurant downtown. We did this once a month now, an informal celebration of our work and friendship. As I walked through the office toward the elevator, employees smiled and waved. Some stopped to chat about their projects. The energy was positive, collaborative, real. I reached the lobby and pushed through the glass doors into the cool San Francisco evening. My team was waiting outside, laughing about something. Sarah saw me and waved me over. Diana, my CFO, was telling a story that had everyone grinning. Thomas Hartley had joined us, as he often did, enjoying his role as mentor and friend. We walked together down the street toward the restaurant, and I felt something I had not felt in years. Peace. Not just satisfaction or pride, but genuine peace. I had fought for myself and won. I had built something good from something painful. I had proven that ethics and success could coexist. I had turned betrayal into triumph and pain into purpose. The restaurant was warm and full of life. We sat around a large table, ordering food and wine, talking about everything except work. We laughed, told stories, made plans for the future. I looked around at these people who had believed in me, who had taken a risk to join my company, who had become not just colleagues but friends. I was home, not in a building or a city, but in a life I had built on my own terms. The door had been right there, and I had walked through it. What I found on the other side was better than anything I left behind. So I want to ask you something. Have you ever had to walk away from something that wasn't serving you, even though it was scary? Have you ever stood up for yourself when it would have been easier to stay quiet? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button. It helps more people find these stories. And if you want to hear more stories about standing up for yourself and finding justice, please subscribe to this channel. Share this with someone who needs to hear that their worth is not determined by how others treat them. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it reminds you that you have more power than you think, and that sometimes the ending you fear is actually the beginning you need. Take care of yourselves, protect your work, and never forget your worth.